because we are obsessed with that end of that. But look at what the Mahabharata has done, and this is the last slide. Mahabharata takes that earthworm and creates a recurring loop out of it. So in the Adi Parvan, you are introduced to someone called Janamejaya, who will perform a snake sacrifice in which the entire Mahabharata is told. Guess what happens? All the gods will descend into the book from Svarga, into this experience machine, and they will enact the whole cycle. In book 6, Bhishma Parvan, in the Bhagavad Gita, you are taught dharma, or how to live with dehiscence. You do what you must do, your duty, but you live. So dharma is taught. In book 12, in Moksha Dharma Parvan, there is a beautiful segment called Narayaniya. In that you are taught how to exit the cycle, the machine. If you don't exit the machine, you go for another round, because Arjuna's son will be Abhimanyu, Abhimanyu's son will be Parikshit, Parikshit's son will be Janamejaya. He will perform the sacrifice again. He will ask for the history, and the cycle continues. Nietzsche calls this the eternal recurrence. It keeps on going. So the program will go on running until at some point you're like, damn it, I'm getting out of this machine. I've seen all this before. I remember. That's the Smriti project, isn't it? That's why it's about Smriti. I remember this. I remember that Draupadi had 5 husbands and they were useless. And they were the best of men, mind you. I have seen all this. I'm not going to look for that kind of happiness in these kinds of givens. I'm not going to mistake perception of reality for reality itself. I will wake up. And that's all the narrative does, right? A narrative is a story that is told with events arranged according to an expectation. And there are only 2 endings to an expectation. It is either different from what has gone before, which would be moksha, or it's a repetition of the same. Those are the only 2 endings of any story. So Vyasa takes narrative logic and pushes it to the extreme. And samsara and moksha now appear as the only 2 possible conclusions of every story, of all stories. Thus, the Mahabharata is not just the first book, the most comprehensive book, but it is also the last book. There are no story endings that could be otherwise. These can rejuvenate themselves thanks to the Vyasa's project. That is the enduring message. Dharma Shastra, Moksha Shastra.
I'm sure everybody in this audience will agree that there was an extremely enlightening talk. Now I actually open the floor for question and answers. There is a mic here which I will circulate. Please introduce yourselves.
Yeah, and I prefer if the question is kept brief, because I'm sure there are many people who would want to ask. So let's give as many people time as we can.
The Mahabharata encourages us to dialogue, samvada, and we are Indians. We love samvada, but this is a question-answer session, so something factual and brief would be nice. Moksha is, you know, some kind of I disappear from here. No, intellectual dehiscence, where you are identifying yourself with the intellect and not with the body and the historical transactions that, and there is a fantastic word for this. This is vyavaharika satta, transactional, vyavahara eva. But this is paramarthika. It is the really real. And when you realize that really real, we call it moksha. And Our tradition has not helped it much by painting moksha in all these metaphorical senses, but that is to make it relevant to everyone. 2,500 years, give or take a couple of hundred, this pedagogic program has been educating a whole nation on dharma. It's just incredible when you think of how much in the West funds are sunk into humanities, into tenured professors that it's like they're like a herd of white elephants, you know, that are maintained. White elephants in tweed jackets.
The short answer, the brief answer is, of course you can read independent narratives and they will always have application and sort of shed light on different aspects of life. But ultimately, to get the full meaning of the Mahabharata, which is what Suktanka tried to do and what we're trying to do, it is to understand it in this comprehensive sense as answering all four Purusharthas. So it will answer your Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha.
And for that, if I may add, Shraddha is required, but if you already have the Shraddha, you don't have to go through all these presentations. But these presentations are necessary when we no longer understand why we are reading the text in the first place. History creates so many doubts in our minds that everybody who's given the Mahabharata will immediately do historical research into it. So we've come to this strange position where we don't have to learn a new skill. We just have to unburden ourselves from the crutches that we have been put in.
Hello, I am a student of Indology, and I find that these days there is a passion or a great curiosity perhaps or tendency to ask about the evidence of Mahabharata and also Ramayana. It is well known that our own government few years back gave a statement in the court that this never happened, it is just a belief. But I would just like to know that have people raised similar questions about other epics, other Arsha Kavyas or other beliefs? And how would you look at it? Thank you.
This obsession with history is a 19th century phenomenon, and all epics to some degree have been subjected to historical research. So it's not only the Mahabharata. Similar questions about composition, about integrity, about the period in which it was written, whether the facts were real, true, whether these things really happened, were raised for the Greek epics also. The historicization, this is why for you to understand the significance of the second half of this presentation, which was the philosophical impact or the philosophical significance of the Mahabharata, it was necessary for me in the first half to set aside history. The historical thing, and this is something Vishwa and I are working on our next book on, history is a narrative that has been constructed and fashioned. And if you want a good translation for history, it is Krista Purana. It is the narrative that is going to result in the theophany of Christ. And that is why this historical narrative has been written. The picking up of the Mahabharata and subsuming it into this specific sense of history has made it impossible for the Mahabharata to unfold its native theophanic effects. And that is the severe loss that has happened through history, that all other cultures now can no longer experience the absolute validity, the absolute givenness of their own theophanic experiences, their own divinities, and that has happened through this thing.
So 2,000 years is roughly what we will take as significant history, right, for humanity. It's like putting an ocean in a cup. You can put it in a cup and say it's ocean water, which is what Mahabharata says. But it's another thing to say there is no ocean but this. So history is such an epistemically deficient category that raising that question is going to block off the work of the epic in the first place. That's why looking at it as mythology is much more sophisticated, because the category of mythology sort of begins to play with what is real and what is perceptual. Right? So the historical question, the worst thing that can happen to Ramayana is the finding of the bridge. Because instantly, in one moment, Ramayana will become a dinosaur bone.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, a Jurassic Park. You see, the worst thing that can happen to these epics is that they be historicized when their function is to historicize history itself.
From this talk I learned of the all-encompassing nature of this epic. It is vast, it provides answers to everything. You enter it, all the emotions are there, all the stories are there. It's like a big river which takes in many rivulets and little rivers, and the individualities of every rivulet comes into the river. If this is so important to our civilization, how do you see it having molded us?
Having molded us. It has molded us. It has significantly molded us because I have traveled the world. I've seen many cultures. The one culture that has, of course there are people now who want to identify Rama Setu and so on, but Indian culture has resisted history more than any other. And it has constantly stayed outside of this historical drama that is unfolding. To give you a very simple example, once people are sucked into history, and history becomes the place where the arbitration between who is saved and who is damned happens, right? Within history, the chosen people will be revealed. Creates massive potential for conflict. The entire Judeo-Christian conflict is a conflict set in history. The entire Islamic-Christian conflict is about proving that it's not you, it is us. We are more civilized, we are more advanced, we are wealthier, therefore we are the chosen ones. What is the significance attached to wealth? It is a mark of divine favor, being chosen. So, although this country has suffered enormous colonization and enormous, you don't see the same kind of anger, for example, that you would see in the Middle East. Because Indians see history as the blink of an eye. And there is not that, Indians have not bought into that historical narrative, and that has protected them.
Is that only the Mahabharata?
Yes.
Only
because you have said it is such a comprehensive book, it is so big and so vast.
Sorry, what is the question?
No, let me just finish that. So, infinite loops of time are told in the Naimisharanya. And the word Naimisharanya comes from the word Nimesha, which is a blink of an eye, a Nimisha. So in a blink of an eye, all of time is presented like a flash. So again, no other story, well, other Puranas are set in the Naimisha, but every Purana is contained in the Mahabharata, I would argue. No other work does that. No other work puts eternity and endless time into a blink of an eye.
So in that context, where do you see Ramayana as compared to
Ramayana is contained in the Mahabharata.
Understanding the narrated quality of reality often saves us from doing injustice or violence. So a story can be told. Someone can come up to me and say, aren't you upset with that person? He did this and this to you yesterday, and therefore, you should go hit him or kill him or whatever. If I have the discrimination, the dispassion to say, that's one way of looking at it. Yes, a story can be told in which he harmed me or he wished to harm me, but that would be one story. I can look at it in another way. That event which had this concrete historical reality suddenly begins to break up, it begins to disperse. So, to prevent yourself from doing violence, telling yourself stories and telling yourself the narrated quality of reality is very, very important. And that's what the Mahabharata, in a sense, has done for Indians. A narrative can be told in which every Indian should go to Bradford or London and blow themselves up saying 200 years back you did this to us. But because this is so deeply rooted through the Mahabharata, it is so deeply rooted in our culture, they go there and they open kebab shops or samosa shops. Why? Because, excuse me, I wasn't even around 200 years. Who is that person to whom someone did something? Probably I am that person who 200 years ago did something, and I have been reborn in India to pay the price for what I did to Indians 200 years ago. So this notion of rebirth, this notion that there is not this linear fixed history, this notion that there are no stable identities, there are not even stable nationalities if you understand the logic of the Mahabharata, has in a sense saved us.
And that is exactly how therapy also works, right? You go and say, my mother did this horrible thing to me. And the therapist sits and says, tell me the whole thing. And then you tell it. And then you blame the mother over and over and over. At some point you realize, this is a story you're telling yourself. And you get over it. The essence of therapy is the understanding of the narrative quality of life. The essence of my empirical, concrete existence is the story I tell myself. I was born on this date. There is a narrative by which I should be sitting and crying. Tomorrow is the 30th anniversary of my mother committing suicide. I could just be sitting in the hotel room throwing myself a lavish pity party. But that's just a narrative. And it opens me up for newer love. Like Ma sitting there, Madhavi Kolhatkar, who gives me love. And hey, there she is giving me love. It makes narrative sense. Let's continue. So the openness to what can kill you faster than history? In history, we are always already dead. If history is reality, you have to die before you're real. Right?
Hi, I'm Romil Kapoor. I just have a small question, like just an extension to Sir's query. That law looks for evidence for every premise. Now, law is a manifestation of the perception that is created around it. So at what point of time does law become dharma or dharma becomes law?
I did not. Yes, the application of a certain kind of dharma would require evidence to demonstrate that the law was broken. Right? No evidence is given for why you shouldn't kill your neighbor. But if you kill the neighbor, then the law will look for the dagger, the corpse, the witness, and so on. So I think in your question there is an exchange of the antecedent and the consequent, which history does. So history is constantly produced by the Mahabharata, and it has been producing it. Narratives produce evidence, not evidence produces that.
If I also understood your question correctly, I'm not sure I did. The question you're asking applies specifically to normative dharma, for which, of course, normative dharma is sort of the transactional reality that happens within the cosmos, and for which, of course, there are standards and evidence and so on. But the emphasis on the Mahabharata is in disclosing the ontological structures. An ontology, the word ontos simply means being, and logos means an account. So ontology is an account of being.
Really real.
Yeah, it's a philosophical account of what really exists. The Mahabharata's main emphasis is in disclosing the ontological structures of reality, because following the normative dharma is not going to get you out of this experience machine. But it's in understanding certain things repeat, certain consistent phenomena happen. How many of you have watched the movie The Matrix? So what is it that starts waking him up? I saw this years ago, so don't quote my recollection of it, but it's that sense of consistency and then breaks in that consistency, right? Understanding that consistency to the cosmos is what Hindu thought calls dharma, in this sense of upholding, that there is an order to the universe. The universe is not random. And Mahabharata is trying to disclose these underlying laws. And that is, at the understanding dharma at that level, is what links you to moksha. When you see these consistencies and then you see these breaks which are, if you want to stay with the movie analogy, it's Mobius trying to contact Neo and say, you know, wake up. So, other questions? You have a question?
So, yeah.
There's one up here and then we'll go back there.
I'm curious because given how comprehensive the Mahabharata is, it basically explains or helps you understand the human condition. So it should be as applicable in the West and not just our culture and our civilization. How do your audiences in the West react to this kind of an explanation? Do they see it as a universal text or with universal application?
Yes.
Or do you have to come back to India and lecture here?
I have a student here, Susan. You want to answer that question, Susan?
My experience of knowing Professor Edbury here and coming to him as a student, it opened up, I can speak loudly, it opened up a whole new way of thinking. Not that one didn't think that way, but it gave it a construct, it gave it a context of these stories. So if I had Greek mythology stories or the Hebrew Bible stories and Solomon and all these people, this is just much more fun. And it is beautiful, it's enlightening, it includes, as they keep saying, every human emotion, so that you don't have to feel as if you feel something bad, you feel something bad. It's not wrong. It's all there. It's just the universe. And the blink of an eye has been very meaningful to me. What's really real. I mean, I can just quote his lectures. And
in a way, Mrs. Bakshi, it has been more difficult to explain this to Indians than to Westerners because they have seen the end of history. Whereas in New Delhi, they've just discovered history. And so it almost feels painful to try to explain here in the West. So you're right, it's a universal text. It's not religious, it's not sectarian, it's an experience machine. And if it was made in Taiwan, it's still an experience machine. It just happens to be made in India, which was not even India then. So.
Where everything will be God, you will see God in everything. So my question is that, what is the concept of God according to Rishi Vyas?
Sat Chit Ananda. And therefore what is joyful rather than pleasurable, right? So for example, when I share a piece of cake, half the pleasure is gone, but there is a joy that I experience coming simply from the application of ethics. Simply because I did the good thing, I feel joyful. So ethics cannot be explained according to utilitarian thought or hedonism. So Brahman is ethically joyful, cognitively the seer, not the seen, and what is really real and not the historic, which is only perception.
So along with Satchit Anand comes only with benevolence?
Absolutely, and compassion, because there is nothing I can cheat on someone or I can harm someone and make a little gain, but I know that it is not lasting. It's just another transaction. It's just another experience in the experience machine.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, you just said that Mahabharata has taught Indians to view history as a blink, in a blink. I feel that it has also harmed us because we are more forgiving in nature. We have been subject to so many invasions, colonizations. If not for these invasions or colonizations, you would not be teaching Mahabharata all over again to Indians in Is it true or not?
I
we are probably more forgiving than we ought to be.
And is that a crime?
Yeah, exactly.
Do we want to remember the old grievance of whether the Messiah has come or not and keep on going?
I do not see the point of this question because of that forgiving nature, Indians can travel the globe freely. Do you really want to belong to a culture that is seen as suspicion everywhere it tries to enter? I really think the forgiving nature has freed us even on a transactional level and has allowed Indians to move around and to be accepted everywhere. The more philosophical answer is that in Kena Upanishad there is a story that a yaksha appears before the gods, and the gods do not know who this strange being is, and then they say to Agni, go and find out about that yaksha. And Agni goes and asks, who are you? And that yaksha takes a blade of grass and puts it before Agni. He asks, who are you? And he says, I am Agni, I am Jata Vedas, I can burn everything there is in this universe. He takes a blade of grass and says, burn this. And Agni tries to burn it and cannot. Then he comes back and says, I could not find out who that being is. Then they say, Vayu, go find out who that being is. And he says, who are you? And he says, I am Vayu, all this that exists I can blow. And he again gives the blade of grass and says, take this up. And Vayu again cannot. And then finally Indra goes, you know how the story ends. Finally Uma Hemavati appears and she is Brahma Vidya and she says, that was Brahman. So Brahman is the power without which even the gods are powerless. So this notion that something was done and could be averted from the Kena Upanishad on, it will be that unless Brahman, the force of existence itself holds itself out, not a blade of grass here will stir. So let's get away from this human hubris, this human arrogance. Everything here is according to Brahman and that is the message of the Mahabharata. In the end, the Mahabharata does not leave the universe with what Nietzsche calls ressentiment. There is no hatred for the world. It is a kind of blessing and saying that everything is as it should be. And that is the message the Mahabharata is trying to teach.
And you have pointed out also that here we are again doing the Mahabharata with what would you have had us do? Imagine living in the regime of Hastinapura still. Kellerer.
But if that is true, if Brahman is what determines every action, then why does Krishna tell Arjun to follow his Swadharma and fight?
That is the next talk. You can't get two you already got two for the price of one. Four.
I can ask one question.
Hi.
There's some at the back.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm Himaya Kulkarni. I'm a student of philosophy in Ferguson College. Hi. Thank you for this very insightful talk. My question is, do you think there should, or is there a way to transcend your own dharma? Because when the concept of dharma becomes really problematic when you consider stuff like the Varna system.
Right. So these varnas or these dharmas are yuga dharmas, which are subject to time. So for us to have a caste system now is simply wrong. It is adharma now. What was dharma of one yuga cannot be the dharma of another yuga. What is Sanatana dharma is different. Right? So the constant confusion of the political and the essential, the constant confusion of yuga dharma and philosophical dharma, if you will, is problematic. And I think it's a good question. You cannot put women in the kitchen anymore. It's just wrong. It's what killed my mother. She said, I hate domesticity. That's what killed her.
Hi. This one is from the cosmological point of view. So we talked about the earth form and we talked about the cycle. So do you see the earth form falling over the cycle sometime down the line? The earth form you talked,
yes.
The dogmatic representations, the walk that we are taking. So if we take it from a cosmological point of view, do you see that earth form somewhere falling down that circle?
No. If you look at the sun, and I'm sitting here, History is in my imagination. The earthworm is in my imagination. History is 2 steps removed from reality. Already perception is 1 step removed, and then the historical narrative is another step removed. So the earthworm is completely made up in our heads.
Can I also answer that through Nietzsche? I have the quote, unfortunately, from one of my teaching slides in German, but I can translate for you. This is Nietzsche showing how the historical perspective has come up. And since it's Nietzsche, it's an absolute. Within one aphorism, Nietzsche will introduce the thesis, demolish it, and leave you in splits of laughter. So I'm going to translate. In some remote corner of the universe that is sort of broken up into endless solar systems, there was once a planet on which clever animals discovered knowledge. It was the most arrogant and the most false moment of world history, but only a minute. After a few breaths of nature, the planet cooled and the clever animals had to die. Do you see how he's mocking the historical perspective which goes out from this clever animal that says, I discover, I know, and he's reintroducing the whole cosmological perspective. And this word is very hard to translate, Verlogenster, the most false, the most fake, the most dishonest moment of world history.
Also ludicrous, right? That's also
yes. So, Verlogen is really this perverse, false moment when humans discovered history. How? By forgetting the entire cosmological background. And the cosmos mocks history daily. And that is why every Hollywood movie is set between this tension that an asteroid is hurtling towards Earth, and can these clever animals avert it in the last second? And since the movies are made by the clever animals, of course the clever animals avert the asteroid.
It was the greatest Jyotishi of the time, Parashara, and I think the Bhrigu and the people who preserve Mahabharata, they also told in Manusmriti the sense of time. So if not historical time, what is the sense of time we must have in the Vyavahar? Not
time and space are just forms of power. The conditions of the experience machine. And the way these are organized in the Mahabharata is through a term called loka, which means a world. So there are many lokas that you could go to. Even Svarga is a loka. So you freely move between. So think of time and space as parameters within the experience machine, because all experience occurs in time and space. And therefore moksha is the realization of that which is other than or not bound by time, space, and causation. Okay, one more question and then we have
So again related to time.
Yes.
So we are trapped in this before Christ and a linear sense of time and Gregorian calendar. Any advice on how to go beyond it and still continue our Vyavaharik?
Why? It is another experience machine. So just continue in this and become thoughtful and ethical. There is no need to now suddenly say we are in a Western
let me end with this, because this is an important message from the whole lecture. What is being problematized here in all our work, all our presentation is not the Christian nature of history, which is a given. There are many books you can read on this. This is not a new discovery that Vishwa and I have made. What is being problematized is the nature of history itself. The Mahabharata shows you certain people are trapped in history. It's not yet a Christian history, but Duryodhana is trapped in history. Duryodhana, all his evil comes from the fact that he cannot forget in childhood, or the inane thing that Draupadi laughed at him. And recounting that historical narrative over and over and over, the greatest evils are perpetrated. The second person who is trapped in history is Dhritarashtra, because as you know from taking the Delhi course, in the Anukramani Parvan, Dhritarashtra will give you a complete history, and after every historical recollection, does anyone know the word he utters? The Sanskrit is? But how does he begin that narration? Or rather, towards the end, he says Kashtam. So, Okay, so he says woe, and history is that which induces woe in you. The entire project, why is that historical narrative given in the first book of the Mahabharata? Because the entire project is to go from that narrative. Dhritarashtra is telling a story about history, about his own historical experiences. Its outcome is only woe. From there, the next narrative the Mahabharata tells is a Hari Katha. So, view the universe under the perspective of your narrative, it will end in death and madness. View the universe under the perspective of a Hari Katha, the play of Hari, it's a joyous narrative. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very enlightening talk. I'm sorry, I know people wanted to ask more questions, but we have time only till 8:30. I would request Shailendra Bharate from Indic Book Club Pune to give the vote of thanks.
Hello. Yeah, so like all good things, today's talk on enduring meaning of Mahabharata must come to end. So I would definitely like to thank Joydeep for introducing the subject to us, because most of us not being trained historians, we would not understand how exactly to look at history. So he set that context for us. Definitely a big thanks to Professor Vishwa for enlightening us with his thoughts. I would like to apologize to all of you because there was some problem in terms of the setting arrangement that we had here, and also like to thank all of you for being so patient, listening to this talk very in a very engaging way. At Indic Academy, we want to present different points of views on the Indic culture, and I think today we had a very engaging talk on that. So thanks to all of you, and I would like to formally declare this event as closed today. Thanks.